Okay, welcome everyone to the presentation by Naomi Ortiz on her book, Mending Spirits.
Great. Am I on the loudspeakers now? Yes. Thank you. So hello, everybody. Actually, I'd like to begin with inviting you, if it's accessible and you're comfortable, to close your eyes and just take a deep breath. Take a moment to feel your body, bringing your awareness to this space. Let's take one more deep breath all the way down into our hips. Thank you. You can open your eyes. So my name is Naomi Ortiz. I'm excited to be joining you via robot from Tucson, Arizona, which is about 40 miles from the US-Mexico border. I'm talking today about mending spirits, disabled Mestiza self-care. So I'm a disabled Mestiza, and Mestiza means that you're Latina, Indigenous, and white, that you're mixed. Instead of using the term intersectionality, I talk about it as living in multiple worlds at one time. Living in multiple worlds means I get to see and experience a lot. It also means that I can feel alone. As a disability justice activist for many years, I was running a national project for disabled youth. And before that, I ran a conflict resolution program for incarcerated adults. I was a disabled mestiza trying to work in organizations where I was an exception to the rule, where who I was didn't fit, except with the folks I was working with. As funding came in, the project would expand, and when the funding left, instead of scaling back, I was expected to do more with less. There were issues with my work in activist communities that I began to consistently notice. See if any of these sound familiar. I had to be available all of the time. I was supposed to monitor huge amounts of information. I didn't have time for creative expression or to learn skills or grow. I felt pressure to manage relationships in the most efficient ways. I often felt overworked and undervalued. It was assumed that personal lives were secondary, including family. And I was participating in systems where I also experienced trauma that was never named. As a disabled mestiza, I experienced these issues acutely in my body. As often as the only disabled person of color in organizations or groups, I spent a lot of energy flipping between worlds, translating and acting as a bridge. I would just collapse at the end of a day. Every day off became about recovery. And if we could switch to slide 2. I knew I couldn't sustain this long term, and I also knew from talking to other organizers that I was not alone in wanting a different way to live. I began searching for help. Other people had to have come up with tactics, right? So I began reading self-help books, looking for classes, and seeking support from healing justice groups. Yet classes and healing justice groups, who I really wanted to learn from, met and practiced in inaccessible spaces. Looking for support in self-help books, I'd sometimes come across a good perspective, like I should exercise or focus on loving thoughts. But when it came to the practicalities of putting this advice into action, a lot of it rested on routine, having a routine. As a disabled person, I live a life that often feels like a tug of war between chaos and order. Each day I wake up is a new body reality, a reality of planning and adapting and planning. With whatever I have put into place to support my body to get up and go doesn't necessarily mean that's what will happen. I function in a body of contradictions, which means the advice that I just needed a schedule to routinize self-care made me feel hopeless. I couldn't figure out how this advice could work in real life. And I internalized this frustration as failure. One of the hardest parts in seeking support was that none of it was created for someone like me. None of it named my truth, my spiritual experience of day-to-day life. The slide you're looking at is of the Sonoran Desert where I live. What I love most about living in a lush environment, which gets around 12 inches of rain a year, is observing living contradictions. Many of the plants here, like ironwood trees, saguaros, they're the ones with the arms in the picture, ocotillos, live hundreds of years. They start each morning in different circumstances. They go for long stretches with nothing but sun, blazing heat, or frigid cold. These plants support whole ecosystems by blooming in the middle of dry summer and by absorbing every drop of rain the sky offers. I realized as much as I love to learn from people, here was a whole valley I could learn from if I paid attention. To embrace myself as a disabled Mestiza means I have to look to complex environments, ones that are not trying to sift or sort things into boxes, but instead surrender to complexity, to what is. And then if we could switch to slide 3. As a disabled person, I really struggle with the word healing. Healing, at least in the ways I hear people use it, usually means they assume that they know what the outcome will look like. Having self-help books describe balance as healing work implies that one just needs to do certain tasks and then they're back to the original. For me, I could do everything they suggested and it would still be unpredictable if it would even help. I'm really drawn to self-care because I know for myself that when I feel like I am doing my best to honor my truth, then I have more patience and capacity to witness myself, to navigate the unpredictable day-to-day life. I'm also better able to show up and witness others, be a person with other people. I wanted to find ways to talk about self-care, which might be smaller, more doable, as well as making radical changes, which meant I had to redefine healing. I have a friend who's a knitter. She says that usually in order to mend a knitted piece, she has to first unravel it further, pulling it apart until she has solid strings to work with. Then she can begin to mend. However, when she's done, she points out that although it might be hard to see the mended section, the yarn may feel rough where the rest of the garment is smooth and soft. The mended section may look slightly lighter or darker. Mending changes the entire piece of clothing forever. I was curious about how we could think about mending, especially when it came to those of us who live in multiple worlds at once. How could we weave in different tactics for self-care? How could we know where and when we had a choice in self-care, resistance, or even surrender? The following sections are a couple of short sections from a chapter, Surrender, which is a chapter in my book, Sustaining Spirit. And if we could switch to the next slide, slide 4. The wind drifts lazily through the yard. The in-between time of twilight has passed and the stars begin to appear. The sunlight pulls away from the face of the mountain and Grandmother Moon glides out into view. Sitting here in the yard, wedged between the cacti and the porch, I am waiting to watch the 4th lunar eclipse this year. This eclipse is occurring when the moon is positioned closest to the earth. Large and round, she fills the sky, and slowly, the creeping shadow of the earth swallows her light. I am witness to her surrender. Watching Grandmother Moon surrender her natural rhythm to the shadow imposed by the earth, I realize that even she must surrender to something outside of her pattern, outside of her own cycle of change. I am watching this old, wise woman, someone who has lived a lifetime learning spiritual lessons, who no longer resents the ways in which these lessons make her grow. I am witnessing the act of surrender and waiting. She is now completely covered, her light blocked by the shadow of the earth. Most every nighttime story she's ever known is one where light fills her sky, one where she guides oceans, animals, and us, but tonight is different. Grandmother Moon sits in this shadowy darkness for what seems like an eternity. No way to predict from where I sit on the ground when the shift back will begin. All I can do is be here in this moment, feel these emotions, and witness what is happening. The entire desert holds its breath. Even the wind settles into the cracks between the sand and rocks. The animals do not make a sound. The wind, animals, and I wait. We witness, hoping and believing that her light will come again. In the silence, I contemplate surrender. There are so many experiences in my life where I have no control, and the only choice was to surrender. Yet in situations where everything seemed out of control, I still had a choice to resist surrender. There's a resistance when I am fighting against surrender that comes from fear of a situation. Years ago, my heart was broken when a romantic relationship ended. I wanted to fight for the relationship, but they broke up with me, and I didn't really have a choice in the situation. I was afraid of what life would look like on my own. We'd been together for a year. I had made choices about my life based on where a relationship was headed. I felt stuck in my anger and fear, but ultimately knew that the relationship ending was the right thing. I wanted to resist things truly being over because I was afraid of how to move on. There's also the resistance that comes from anger when I know not to surrender because my boundaries are being violated. This kind of resistance is one which invites me to action. For example, preparing for a doctor's visit recently, I knew the doctor would want to examine my body, to touch and move my joints as he wanted. As a child who went through multiple surgeries, saying no to being touched by medical professionals often wasn't possible. As an adult, I can make different choices. I surrendered to going to the appointment, but brought along a person willing to be an ally. They came in the room with me. I positioned my body so the doctor could not easily grab me. I positioned my cane between my body and the space where the doctor would sit. When the doctor came in, and inevitably went to grab at my body without listening to what I had to say. The person I had brought with me as an ally and I both forcefully said, "No, wait." I described to the doctor how the way he examined my body could potentially cause pain for an extended period of time, and what I needed in order to avoid that. Recognizing the disrespect of my boundaries lets me know that I need to take action. So the chapter continues, and I describe this year. All these things happened which were totally out of my control. Things like there was a water leak and our ceiling collapsed in, my partner got laid off from work, so like big life things. And I describe how I navigated these things. So the next section, closer to the end of the chapter. I had time to think about all of this as I sat witnessing the full eclipse of Grandmother Moon. There's something so comforting about sitting here on this chair, seated in the dirt, watching her be subjected to a loss of light that is completely out of her control. It's not just me, I think. Even in this disquiet, I'm struck by the gentleness of my surroundings, the gentleness of the wind as it drifts lazily through the yard, the calm silence of the bugs and coyotes, which are usually making a racket under the full moon, and even the gentleness of my heart as I witness this eclipse. My thoughts drift. This is an event which is out of her control and obscures her light. There's so much intensity moving into shadow and then back into light. Look at the gentle way she moves through it. Suddenly, the rim of Grandmother Moon brightens, brilliant white. In the time of shadowy darkness, I had managed to forget how bright she really is. As her being is slowly unveiled, I know I am watching the gentleness of surrender and the beauty of rebirth. I think about the cycles we go through. I'm aware of my deep desire to create routine as a way to sustain balance in my day-to-day life. Yet as soon as I think this, I realize I'm talking about balance and routine like it's some kind of way to control the cycles in my life. Although there are some predictable patterns, so much happens in life which I cannot predict or control. Self-care isn't about guaranteeing happiness or control. Part of self-care is about survival. Ideally making it through the day, weaving in small ways to support my body, mind, and heart so that I can know when there is a choice to be made or when I need to just surrender. Being gentle with myself in times of surrender reminds me that I'm deserving of gentleness. This reminder feeds my ability to know when to resist, when to know enough is enough, and also when I'm selecting to embrace surrender as a way through. There is a time for surrendering, a time for quiet stillness and waiting. This kind of waiting is not an act of passivity, but an act of courage. Courage gathered up in the self-care lesson of learning how to be gentle with myself. Grandmother Moon sat veiled in darkness, but she burst out reborn when the timing was right. When I'm dealing with a life eclipse, an event or situation in my life where the only thing I can do is surrender and wait, self-care takes on a new level of urgency. Finding small ways to be gentle with myself is the way I fuel my courage. When no decision I can make can get me out of a situation, choosing small ways to be gentle to myself keeps me going. If I were gentle with myself, I'd play some music. If I were gentle with myself, I'd give myself the day just to feel depressed and not be responsible. If I were gentle with myself, I'd make a snack to take with me when I go. If I were gentle with myself, I'd bring a pillow and a book with me to the waiting room. If I were gentle with myself, I'd breathe and stop pressuring myself to be hypervigilant and always planning. These small acts of gentleness towards myself, especially in times when I am feeling the harshness of life, remind me that gentleness is possible. These small acts make surrendering to whatever is happening a little more bearable. When I'm gentle with myself, my mind remembers that I have a body that needs to be attended to. In times of crisis, when I am consciously being gentle with myself, I'm also better prepared for when the shadow shifts away, freeing my light. Not having spent all of my energy on resistance generated by fear, I instead, through small, gentle actions, have used some of my energy on sustaining myself. Gentleness weaves my body, mind, and spirit together so that they do not disconnect as the life eclipse passes through. By letting the act of surrender become a more complex experience, not just by being passive, but approaching it as a time when I can gift myself with gentleness, I am giving myself an opportunity to have fun. Resistance is always an option, but I'm learning to trust my inner sense of when to resist or when to be gentle with myself by choosing to surrender and let go. So if we could go to slide 5. And just because I can't see it, it has like a circle with like different things it says, correct? Awesome. So this slide reflects the different areas of life. So the self, work and or school, spirituality, culture. And I just blinked out on the fourth one. Can somebody say it? Family and relationships. How could I forget that? Thank you. So when I do online groups, I ask people to think about these items, these areas where they might be hard on themselves, and then think of a way that they could bring gentleness in. So I actually wanted to take a couple of minutes of time and just let you talk to your neighbor or self-reflect by yourself on areas in these categories where you might be hard on yourself and you could bring some gentleness in. And we're just going to take a couple of minutes. So if you share with somebody, just be mindful of time, and I'll stop us after a minute and you can switch. Is everybody clear about that? Does anybody have any questions about doing that? Nope? Okay, great. So if you want to talk to the person next to you, or if you'd like to self-reflect, please do that.
So do you literally want me to be in your face?
So if you're talking to a partner, you'll want to switch people. Great, so if we can wrap up conversation, I know that you're probably just getting started. And thank your partner if you're talking to somebody else. Great, so I wanted to open it up. We have a few more minutes. I wanted to open up for questions. And if you're interested in the book, Sustaining Spirit, if we can go to the last slide so you can see what it looks like. Sorry, Lisette, I think you were. It's on reduced price at the summit, and the Kindle version is on sale this weekend in honor of this awesome, awesome conference. So yeah, and if you want to connect with me, you can find me at naomiortiz.com. So if we'd like to open it up for questions, is there somebody who can bring a microphone around? Oh, fabulous.
Questions? Yes.
Hi, Naomi. It's Barbara. I thank you so much for your talk. I got a lot out of it. I was wondering if you could give us, for a recent example of a situation where you stopped and said, oh, I need some self-care, and what that was and what you did and how that felt for you.
Sure, yeah. So the question, if I'm understanding, is a time when I stopped and practiced self-care and what that was like for me. Let's see. So this morning, I'm on West Coast time, which means I started the conference with a live stream at 6:30 this morning. For me, and I'm not a morning person. So I set my alarm back a little earlier than I probably normally would. But I got up and I made myself a cup of coffee before I sat down to listen to the awesome talk. And that for me is just a super simple way of doing self-care, of giving myself a little extra time to actually get what I need together. And I have to say, I think that made all the difference for me being here with you all and feeling really good in my body. So that's a very simple thing, but that's one example. Are there questions about people trying to figure out self-care or?
Hi, I'm actually here as an act of self-care and was extremely distressed, and my friend is working at this conference and was like, come here. One of the questions I'm asking in my workplace right now is about the tension between surrendering, like when do I surrender to what's going on and when do I push back against this? And I was really intrigued by your discernment process, and I'm having a hard time navigating surrender within capitalism, and how much agency
Yes.
I actually have. And I'm wondering if you could speak to how you think through the agency in surrender within the context of work and capitalism, kind of in that circle.
Oh my gosh, that's such an amazing question, and I feel like I could write my next book on that.
Let's do it together.
Because that's so real, right? No, I think that is so real and such a challenge and something that I think so many of us struggle with. I think that for me, it's layers. So the first layer is how am I treating myself in this situation? How am I at least building up my own capacity to just be present with witnessing? To me is a lot of what is entailed in capitalism, because it's painful, right? Like what we witness is pretty painful. And so that witnessing aspect is really important. And so I have to be in a really solid place in my body in order to witness. I'm not always there, but I know when I am there, I feel like I'm able to have more agency of like, oh no, I need to say something about this. This is not okay. Or this is like just not, I'm not feeling kind of the moved to participate in this at this point, and just accepting my own limits too. That's kind of how I come at it. So I think we have time for one more question, correct?
Yes. Oh.
Naomi, I really appreciated you speaking about self-care practices and about changing how we live and act in our lives in multiple domains. And I wanted to bring up something that I heard during our conversations, but also that I say routinely, and I hear other people in organizing and activist space say all the time, which is like whenever we talk about the topic of self-care, every single one of us will automatically say, well, I'm really bad at self-care. And we're not lying, we're telling the truth. We will all say that. And we're all really great at talking about how important it is. And we're all really great at encouraging everyone else to do it, and about telling everyone we care about and acquaintances and people we're presenting with, like, oh, self-care is really important. Remember to take time for yourself. Remember to make time for family and friends. Remember that like it's not the end of the world if you don't finish this project or this task or get this particular job or whatever. But then we don't apply it to ourselves. Hold on, audio is being weird. We don't apply it to ourselves. We're all hypocrites, and we all know that. I'm calling myself out too, not just everyone else here, but like all of us and me. And like it's almost like it's an invisible badge of honor, even though we claim otherwise. So like we claim simultaneously we're all supposed to be having self-care and doing it, and it's really important and valuable, and it's anti-capitalist, and it's an act of resistance, when what we mean by self-care is actually our preservation, like the Audre Lorde quote, and not when we're talking about wealthy, white, non-disabled women, but like actually us. But then at the same time, we simultaneously are like, I don't do that. I can't do that. If I do that, I will in fact be this guilty, bad person, not using resources the way I'm supposed to be. Like, and we don't actually apply that. But like, we all know this. We all know all of this. I'm not repeating anything new or anything that none of us like somehow wouldn't have already known. So how do we get past that? Like, okay, great. We all know this. We all agree it's a problem. How are we actually going to get past it in a concrete way? And I don't have any answer to that. I don't know that you do either, but maybe you have some ideas, because that is something that I hear everywhere. We all say it. I am bad at self-care. That's immediately what we all say whenever we bring up the topic.
I think you named something so important. And I think, first of all, there's a real beauty in embracing that we're all, would you say, doing it but not doing it. What is that word? Talking about it but not doing it. Hypocrite, yes, that we're all like hypocrites in that. I think that's definitely true on a lot of levels. I talk a lot about this in the book, because that actually was like my fundamental question, was like, how do we do this in real life? You know, when I really care about a bunch of issues that are happening in the world, how does this happen in real life? How do we do this? And so first part for that, for me, the way I had to come at it was I have to define self-care as spiritual work. It has to be on that level for me, which means it takes my body, my mind, my heart, my spirit. It also, like for me, when I associate spiritual work, I also associate slowing down. And that, I think, is the biggest issue, and it's definitely where we get the most pushback in our activist communities, is when we slow down, people notice, and we do not support each other in that slowing down. The other thing internally for me was to start making choices about the activism that I participated in from a spiritually centered place, meaning sitting with it, really asking myself if I felt like this is like the right place for me to be putting my spoons, my energy, and then moving forward if it was. And if not, thinking about how I could support others, or if there are smaller things I could do to support others. And it's hard to make those choices, but at least for me, those are some of the ways I've come at really putting this into real life. So I want to thank everybody for being here and being flexible with robot self. This has been fun. So please find me after, and I don't know if we have another session in here right away.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Last one.
Okay, so I'll sit right here
Before the
if anybody
keynote.
wants to talk further for a few. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just wanted to put a plug for that book because Naomi's a good friend of mine, and I've read the whole book already, and it's absolutely fabulous, and you can take it one chapter at a time, and what stuck with me was where are you rooted, and I ask myself that every day. So thank you, Naomi.
Yay, thank you.